I'm Annie Krall, and I'm standing here in downtown St. Charles, right on historic Main Street, and we were able to catch up with a St. Charles native who's also a very successful film director, talking about his career, decades long in fact, and the documentary he made right here in his hometown, thanks to the Missouri tax incentive, making it more realistic to have more productions here right at home.
So it's all very kind of serendipitous. I was at a graduation party. I'm a former high school teacher. And I was at a graduation party for some former students, and I ran into a local pastor who said, "Hey, I just met this incredible young woman. She's an Afghan refugee. Her name's Zizi Safi, and she's got a memoir that she's written. There's some people that are kind of poking around about maybe making a movie. I want to point her in the direction of someone that I can trust." And she doesn't really know that many people in America. And so he connected us, and last June, Zizi and I met at Longhorn Steakhouse for what was supposed to be like 45 minutes to an hour. We met for 3 to 4 hours probably. And once I heard her story, and the quick version of that story, she was born in Afghanistan in 1997 under Taliban rule. When she was 15, she was captured by members of the Taliban for the crime of learning English. She was able to outsmart them, get back to her family, and her father, who had worked with the U.S. military as a security official, was able to go to a U.S. and coalition forces military base and essentially plead with them to let his daughter on the base in some sort of working capacity, and she became the youngest and first female translator and cultural advisor in the history of Afghanistan. She'd work off and on with the U.S. military and coalition forces for a decade before she would ultimately qualify for a special immigrant visa. She was on the last flight out of Kabul on August 15th, 2021, literally the last domestic flight out of Kabul. She was on it before it fully fell to the Taliban. And now she lives in Missouri and works as a case manager at an organization called Monarch Immigrant Services. And she's helping her fellow Afghans resettle here in the St. Louis area. So when you meet that person and you are a filmmaker or a storyteller of any kind, it immediately was something that was just incredibly compelling to me. And then when you meet Zizi, just on top of the extraordinary nature of her story, the extraordinary nature of her as a person, and all that it took for her to get through the things that she got through, it made it really, really, evident to me that this was a story that deserved to be told and heard by as many people as possible.
And let's talk about where we're at in the production world. So where did you guys film in the St. Charles area? And then, of course, where are you at in terms of filming, post-production, things of that nature?
So in St. Charles specifically, so we're sitting on North Main Street in St. Charles here at our offices at Covered Bridge Studios. That's the name of our company here. We filmed at an Airbnb a couple of blocks, literally 2 blocks up the way at 3 blocks, 5th and Monroe. We housed crew on the south end of Main Street. It's very nice. I live 8 minutes north of here. Zizi lives 8 minutes south of here. And so we were really able to, first and foremost, the fact that Zizi and I are both in this location made it kind of the natural, okay, probably makes sense to do most of our filming here. But also just there's a tremendous amount of local help from the standpoint of the local film office here in St. Charles, Chris Wilson, and local folks, just, Airbnb hosts that are just so excited to hear about the story we're telling and super, super gracious to allow us to use their space to film some interviews and things like that.
How big of a team did you have on something like this?
So I would say our biggest day on set in terms of, kind of all hands on deck, 14 to 17, which is pretty limited, all things considered. But with the documentary, it's also can be a little bit built out. We were quite skeleton crew for a good amount of it, but some of the more involved scenes and recreations that we did required having more hands on set. And then we shot February 24th to March 1st was principal photography. Because Zizi's an immigrant and a refugee, she's kind of living through this historical moment in time that we're living through. So we're continuing to capture things. And as a consequence, that's kind of shifting our edit. But I would say we're on the back half of post-production, feel really solid about the creative direction of the story, and are looking towards now just kind of moving towards the finishing touches, like the nuances of various themes, and really just making sure we're telling Zizi's story to the best of our ability.
Do you have a dream, Eric, in terms of where you want it to land, when you want it to come out? What should people look forward to in terms of actually being able to watch Queen of the Bass?
Yeah, so, we're on kind of a dual track. Zizi's going to become a citizen by this time next year, so around August 2026. And that's kind of on a parallel track of when we'd like to kind of be running on the festival circuit, ideally. As far as where would I like this to be viewed, I'm going to give the duh answer. Wherever the most number of people can access it with, as easy as possible. So obviously, a major streamer would be huge for us. But again, my goal from the beginning has been to just tell Zizi's story as authentically and honestly as I can and as best as I can, and trust that the chips will fall where they may with everything else. So we'll keep you posted, though.
I love it. I don't disagree with that at all. I want to talk about the tax incentive for a second. How
Please.
did that impact the documentary? How did that make your life easier? Because obviously we've been hearing about the tax incentive for probably north of a year now at this point, but how on the ground did that actually help you guys make this all possible?
Yeah, so the tax credit is kind of the game changer in all of this that as you're profiling more of these films. It not only gave us a financial incentive to be able to make this here, and don't get it twisted, like even on a lower budget, I don't want to dismiss our budget, we have a good budget, but on the lower side, every dollar counts. So the tax incentive and the ability to keep the credit or sell the credit, usually for about 93 cents on the dollar, is extraordinarily valuable. The other component of that, at the same time that you had the tax credit pass, the St. Louis Film Office rightfully said, well, hey, we need to bring someone in that can execute on this new tax incentive. And they brought in a woman named Kelly Hyatt, who, we both know. And Kelly is, I'll put it this way, she gets stuff done. And I really like people that get stuff done. And so whether it was a question I had about the tax credit application, a question about filming, a question about can we film at the airport potentially? If so, who do we need to talk to? Not only the responsiveness, but just her ability to cut through the minimal red tape, but just move through it on behalf of productions is really what cleared the way, along with the film tax credit, for us to be successful. And then we've seen that trickle over here to St. Charles.
One of my last questions for you, Eric, is that we've been able to unpack so much already, but why is it so important to have an operation like this, be in St. Charles, have that Hollywood level quality film documentary here in Missouri, considering everything that you've already talked about? Your home, you had your subject here, you had the tax incentive, but where do we go now, considering that you have more, I think, resources and a little bit more momentum as of, mid-2025? Why is it crucial that we're able to do all this kind of stuff, and you don't just have to be in Los Angeles in order to make a really cool film or documentary?
So someone asked me a similar question recently, and they said, why are you doing this in St. Charles? And my response was, because I can. And thanks to technology, honestly, post-pandemic, the rise of Zoom and people's understanding that we can work with people all around the world, you add in the tax credit, and I've just been steadfast in my goal of we can make Missouri the next Georgia, in terms of, people are looking for a business-friendly state. They're looking for big cities like St. Louis, Kansas City, even down Springfield, Cape Girardeau, and everything in between. And here in St. Charles, Kelly says this, you can be anywhere in St. Charles. It's really anywhere USA. And so this is an opportunity more than anything. And my message is largely to civic leaders around here. This is something that has huge dividends for our community. Not only is it driving growth in sectors that aren't related to film, you wouldn't think about it this way, but it's not just camera houses or, you know, walkie-talkie, you know, rentals or things like that. It's not just film stuff. It's lumber that you're getting from somewhere local. It's, you know, grandma's cookies down the street that we're getting cookies from to bring to set daily. There's working with an ice vendor because you need to create snow. There's all of these ancillary benefits, hotels, for local economies. And we've already seen somewhere near $12 million were in tax credits were given out last year, and over $32 million was spent. And so just like that right there is kind of the message, which is this is an opportunity for people here now. It's an opportunity to retain talent, and it's an opportunity to draw talent from other places who say, I don't want to go to LA or New York or Atlanta, nothing against any of them. I want to stay here, or I want to, you know, stay in this general area. And our answer is you can, and you can do it here. And I would love nothing more than to just see an influx of talent and particularly young people to find St. Charles. And as a lifelong resident and someone who, you know, wants to spend the rest of my life here, I really care about this community. And so to continue to fill it with young people who are going to build families here and send their kids to our schools here, I just think that there's a real opportunity to bring an entire industry to St. Louis writ large, but St. Charles in particular.